Hello, community, and welcome to this new episode of BIM Coach. I am Hector Burciaga, the BIM Coach. We've got a very exciting video today as one of our followers has sent us a question. The question here is relating to a video I uploaded a few years back about custom property mapping with Navisworks. So, this question is from our follower, Andreas Tigges. He is from Germany, and he is telling us that he tried to modify the takeoff property map.xml, and he's trying to use this to map two conditions. Now, further discussing this with Andreas, we've come to the conclusion that as of Navisworks 2016, you don't need to modify the XML document to map these conditions, and he is fully clear on this. However, he has a very specific need, and his main reason for trying to map them is to make the whole process a little more efficient, as he has repetitive projects where he needs those conditions to be automatically mapped and not having to go through and map them manually each time. So in this video, we're going to talk about methods that we can use to further our efficiency while working with Navisworks and Quantity Takeoff. Alright, so I'm going to start off with this sample file that Andreas so kindly sent to me to analyze. It's a simple little house, and he's trying to take off very specific properties. Now, the idea is that he wants to take off these properties over and over again, independently of which project he's working on. So he wants to save time on having to go through and map these properties manually. Now, the nice thing about Navisworks is that it creates template files that we can easily export and import for future use. So we're going to capitalize on this and use it to our benefit. First of all, I need to make sure that I have all the correct windows open. So I'm going to work with obviously the selection tree. Second, I'm going to work with my sets window. Additionally, I need to have my properties window open. Also, make sure that I have the find items window as well as the quantification workbook. So looking at the email that Andreas sent me, I can see that he is looking for the geometry to match these two specific parameters. So the first thing we're going to do is use these to search for geometry within our model matching this criteria. Okay, so I pull up my find items window. Let me see here. This is in German, so I'm going to try my best to match as closely as I can to what he has in the picture. Let's see, it's pset wall common. Property is external condition equals true. Okay, and the next property is the QTO wall-based quantities net side area defined. Okay, so we've got this criteria ready for us to search the model. Okay, so let me go ahead and click on find all. So if I take a look at my selection tree, I can see that there are several items that are already selected that meet this criteria. Okay, that's perfect. I can also click on the hide unselected button, and this will hide anything that is not selected. So in this case, I can see what geometry meets the criteria that I just searched for. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open my sets window, and I'm going to save this search set. So let's go ahead and name this example quantity. Now, before I continue, let me emphasize on the differences between a search set and a selection set. A selection set is going to be a group of geometry objects that I have selected within my model and saved it as a future selection set that I can call up based on that specific geometry. Now, this is pretty static because if I update the model, there's a high possibility that I will lose that selection set, and when I try to use it, it won't select anything. Now, in contrast with the search sets, this is where it gets really interesting because the search sets are based on parameter searches. So independently if I update or not the model, it's always going to look for those parameters as long as we have pretty standardized methods for modeling and we keep everything standardized and repetitive. The search sets will not have any issues independently of what model we're using. So the idea is that these search sets can be saved for future reference in future projects. So now that we have this search set created, if I take a look here at my sets window, there is an icon that says import export. If I click export, I can export it as an XML file that I can use for future reference. So I'm going to go ahead and save this XML as example quantity, and I will save it. Okay, once that is saved, I can go ahead and discard this. I'm going to click on unhide all. I don't need that at the moment. And I can also minimize my find items window. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to open is my quantification workbook, and I'm going to anchor this really quick. I'm going to go ahead and set up a project. Now it's going to give me this window. I leave this window on for educational purposes. I like to explain what it's about, so I don't turn it off. But just so you know, you can go through and see some tutorials on working with the quantification workbook if you feel that you need a little bit more practice. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on remind me later. If you feel that this really starts to bug you, just go ahead and click on never and it won't ever bug you again. Okay, so the first thing we're going to see is the quantification setup wizard. Okay, this is where we can choose the format of our quantification workbook. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and work with none because I'm going to create my own. So I will select none and click next. Once I have done that, I need to select my measurement units. So this being in Germany, it's obviously in metric, and I will click next. The next thing I need to do is specify what type of units I will be using per each property or each takeoff. In this case, I will go ahead and keep the defaults. Depending on your project, you will definitely have to change these values. So let's go ahead and click next. And it is telling me that I am ready to create the database. So let's go ahead and click on finish. Okay, so now that we have done this, we are working with a fresh, clean quantification workbook. So we need to take off the surface area of the example quantity that I have created or that I have grouped here in my search set. So I'm going to just keep it simple and create a simple item called wall area. Okay, now that I have the wall area, I can add a description if I need to. In this case, I'm just going to keep it very simple. I don't need that at the moment. And now the next part is to define the item calculations. So my primary quantity is going to be equals area so that it pulls the area parameter, which is actually mapping the model area. And in my units, I'm going to set it to square meters. Okay, so far we've created our search sets as well as our quantification workbook. The next step is for us to jump into the mapping properties of Navisworks. Now, as of 2016, Navisworks allows you to directly map the properties through its property mapping options within the quantification workbook. But just like Andreas explained in his email, he doesn't want to do this every single time he has a project because it is a repetitive thing that does not need to be done every time. So we can capitalize on what I explained in our previous video of mapping the properties so that you don't have to go in and do this every time. All right, so in order for us to do this, we are going to go to C, Program Files, Autodesk, Navisworks Manage 2018 or whatever version you're on, Quantification, Takeoff Maps. So we're going to see a takeoff property map 1.xml file here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file and I'm just going to name it XML property map 1 underscore default, just so that I know that this is the original. Always keep the original just in case you goof something. You don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as default, and I'm going to open the takeoff property map 1.xml. All right, so let me open it. Now, me personally, I'm using a program called Brackets. It's a free program. You can download it online, and it works very nicely. It has this nice interface, and it color codes everything, so it's easier to look at. You can also edit with a simple notepad, whichever you feel more comfortable with. Okay, so here's my takeoff property map 1.xml file. The next thing I'm going to do is open my search sets XML file. Now, if you remember from my previous video, you need to copy the parameter and the parameter properties so that Navisworks can identify them. Okay, so I will scroll down in my takeoff property map all the way down to area map. The last one should be area map 7. Let's scroll down, and Here it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy between the takeoff property map brackets. So I'm going to copy all of that and I'm going to paste it directly under. And I'm going to change the name from area map 7 to area map 8. Okay, so where it says dimensions here, name internal equals, and then we have dimensions. I'm going to copy from the search sets, I'm going to copy the whole name value and I'm going to paste it over the name value for dimensions. So, okay, there's the QTO wall-based quantities. The next one I need to replace is this one that says area. So let's go back to our search sets XML file and I'm going to copy all of this information here and paste it directly over this. I'm just going to overwrite it. Okay, so here we're telling Navisworks that it's going to look for, within this category, I'm going to look for this parameter, and that's what I'm going to map to area. Okay, so I can go ahead and save this. Depending on your privileges on your computer, it might give you an error. So if it gives you an error, just save it on a different folder. All right, so after that's done, I'm just going to copy it directly from my folder where I saved it and overwrite the one on the program files, Autodesk Navisworks Manage, Quantification, Takeoff Maps route. Okay, so overwrite that, give whatever permissions you need. And okay, now that that is done, I need to close Navisworks. So let me close this and I need to open it once again. Okay, so once my Navisworks is open, I am going to append that IFC file once again and just give it a few seconds to load. And okay, so I'm going to import once again my search sets. That's always a good practice to have those already preloaded. I'm also going to set up my quantification workbook. I'm going to browse to a catalog and I'm going to import the QTO workbook.xml file that I created. Okay, so that is done. So traditionally, what I would need to do is go in and map the properties manually, but since I already modified that XML file, I can skip this step. So let me just select my example quantity. I'm going to hide unselected. I always get in the habit of doing this, just in case I imported the wrong one, just to be sure that I have the correct one in there. So I'm going to select my quantification item, and I'm going to do a model takeoff to wall area. Okay, so if I check here, it's already taking off that area value into this item. So I didn't need to go in here and modify the item map rules because it's already a default that I defined in Navisworks. So I just skipped this step. It's a nice feature that Navisworks has, but you know, I can understand, and seeing from the point of view of Andreas, I can understand where it can become a little bit repetitive and unnecessary. If it's always the same thing, just leave it by default in your XML file and you can skip all of that manual mapping. So this is pretty much the process that you need to do in order to make Navisworks map custom properties and leave it as a default. Because you can always do a custom mapping through the item map rules, but if it's something that repeats, I would suggest that you modify your XML file and just add them in there. And always keep the original, just in case you goof something up. So a recap, you need to invest a considerable amount of time at the beginning or on your first project, because you are going to define most of the criteria that you will use throughout your future projects. Now, once you have this, you can replicate it along other projects and just adjust as necessary. Your template, so to speak, will keep on updating as you move along through new projects. It is wise to use this import and export function both for the quantification workbook and your search sets, as this will cut back on time in future projects. So I want to give special kudos to Andreas for sending us his question and sharing this file with us. And I'd like to thank all of our followers for being active in our community. We will continue to answer questions through videos. So if you have an interesting question that you need answered, feel free to email it to me, and every week we'll be uploading a new video to the BIM Coach channel. Thank you for listening in. See you next time.